Hey, thanks for stopping by at Twisted Art Designs. Today I'm going to just show a really quick idea, and it is just taking another idea that I saw on a YouTube video, and I'll link that, and I'm just taking it a step further and adding my own little touch. I'm sure this isn't something new. Lots of people have probably done it, but I'm just showing my tips and ideas for making some button ephemera. So these would be great to use on your junk journals or on tags that you layer, things like that. And they're just super cute and fun, and they're made out of buttons. So I'm taking old buttons. This was a pearl button, and it's got a flat shank to it that's not very high, so it wouldn't stick up too high to have that on a tag or something. And let me show you one that I did that was on a pearl. So here's another pearl button, same kind of thing. I received a wonderful package of Happy Mail from Marie, and look at this beautiful tissue paper that she coffee dyed. This is what the Happy Mail was wrapped in, so I'm using that to stamp on. I stamped a butterfly using a very small rubber stamp, and I used Ranger Archival ink because it's archival and it doesn't bleed. I used color pencils to color the image on the tissue paper. And then I used Mod Podge. I just put a little bit of Mod Podge with a paintbrush over it, laid the tissue paper piece over it, and then made sure that the edges were covered as well. Let it dry. And then I'm using a little emery board to remove the tissue paper off the edge, an emery board, or if there's holes in the button, to repoke the holes. I'm using this little round file to poke back through the holes after it dries to kind of like file out and file those holes back in, because I do want the buttonholes to show. You don't have to, you can leave it solid too. And once this dried, and I removed the extra pieces of paper off the back, look how the pearl still shows through. So it shows through that coffee dyed tissue paper, and the pearl button shows, but now I've got a really cute butterfly image, and this would be adorable to put onto a dangle or the front of a journal or on a tag, anything like that. So let's get started and do a couple. This is one that I've stamped on napkin. If you have your napkin image and you peel away the layers, I'm taking that white inner layer like this. It's really nice and thin. And I stamped a dragonfly. I colored it with colored pencil. I used my Mod Podge to put it over the button. I let it dry, and once it was dry and I sanded off those edges, I used distress ink to go around that edge and distress the edge. And look at that pretty dragonfly button. I can't wait to tie a piece of embroidery floss or silk ribbon through that and put it onto a tag or in a journal. Here's another one the same way. Here's the little rubber stamp that I used. Stamped it on tissue paper, stamped it on the inside of napkin, put it on. After it dried, I used distress ink around the edge, and then I used some Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 and a water brush to brush that. And then what I will do is take these outside and use some sealer, some acrylic sealer, and just spray it over just to seal that in. But look at that cute ladybug button from this cute little rubber stamp. These are done with napkin images. So you peel the napkin down to the first layer, put Mod Podge or matte gel medium over your button, and apply it, let it dry, and then sand that edge away with a piece of sandpaper or an emery board. And then make sure that you put your holes back in to have your little buttonholes in. But look at how cute those are to have birds, butterflies, and things on your buttons. So for buttons, if it's a button like this and it's got a dip in it, you can flip it over and do that on the flat side, because this can always be glued down to your card or your tag or tied on or sewn on, but you have the whole back flat image to put on something, an image that you either stamp or use from a napkin. This one was done using tissue paper. This is tissue paper that had keys on it, so I used a piece of that on a flat button. That looks really cute too. I'm still going to go around and distress the edges. This is the Tim Holtz paper that you use for collage. So I use some of that Tim Holtz tissue paper to collage onto that button. You can also take some of your ugly chipboard buttons. So I've had these in my scrapbooking stash for probably 10 years. They aren't being used because I really don't like them. And I know you can cover them with other things, book text and napkins and whatnot, but that's what I did with this cute butterfly image. I put some white gesso over the image that was on the chipboard like this, to cover that image so it didn't show through a lot, and it shows through a little, but I kind of like that little bit of pattern in the background, but it didn't overwhelm it. And that's what I revamped my chipboard ugly pieces to make it into something pretty to use on my journals. These aren't buttons, they're chipboard tags, but why not cover those too? So let's do one and I'll show you what it looks like in the process. Here's a piece of a chipboard, and it's not a button, but you could always poke holes in it. And this would make a really cute little chipboard button, so let's try that too. I'm going to use this beautiful piece of coffee dyed tissue paper from the Happy Mail from Marie. Thank you, Marie. Look at that cool pattern. I'm going to use a piece of that. And this button that's purled. My archival ink, I'm going to use this stamp with a postage stamp and this rubber stamp. It's a big rubber stamp, but the images are all small. So that's how I created this dragonfly. I just inked that little dragonfly, stamped it onto the inside of napkin, and it made that. So I'm going to use a butterfly, and I'm going to do layering. So I'm going to layer on this one. I'm also going to do a mandala using my little mandala stamps that I show often in videos. I'm going to do one of these little chipboard tags and add a mandala to it. So first step would be to take my Ranger archival ink, and I'm going to stamp this postage stamp image first onto the tissue paper. And this is just a quick and easy project. So just like that. And now I'm going to apply that to this button. So I'm going to just apply a little bit of Mod Podge. You could use matte gel medium, whatever you've got on hand. I'm going to cover the top of the button evenly, and then I'm going to lay this tissue paper over, and then I'm going to use another layer over the top, just gently. You have to be careful so you don't tear your paper. And then I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I'm going to ink and use this little butterfly here. So I'm just adding ink to that image on the back of the stamp. And then I'm going to tear around this little butterfly and just kind of tear it out, because I don't want to cover the entire button with another layer. Just this little image is going to get layered over the postage stamp. So there I have just that little image. I'm going to add that to the top of the button. I love how these pearl buttons, the pearl still shows through. It's so pretty. So look how pretty that is with two things layered over the top of each other. I love that. And I'm going to let that dry. I have this pretty napkin that has all kinds of mandala images on it, and I'm going to use this one over this button. I'm flipping it over. Instead of using the rounded top, I'm going to use the flat back side. And it was brought to my attention by my mom, who's doing this project with me, that you don't need to put a layer of Mod Podge onto your plastic button and then put your napkin on. If you're using a napkin image, if you're using anything thicker like tissue paper or the Tim Holtz papers, you do have to put a layer on your button, then put the paper down, and then put another layer on the top. If it's a napkin image, because they're so thin, you can put the image over the button and line it up where you want it to be on the button. And then just put your layer over the top of the button. Put your one layer and it'll soak through the napkin and hold it onto the button. And it keeps from tearing your napkin. Thanks for the tip, Mom. So let's try it. Yep, goes right through the napkin, goes right onto the button, and you don't tear your napkin image. Perfect. I'm going to let that one dry. So I kind of have 3 different ones going at once, but that's pretty much how this project goes. So here's that piece of chipboard with a design on it that I don't quite care for. I'm going to put some gesso onto the chipboard and just spread that gesso out, make this chipboard white. Just like that. And I'm going to let that dry and we'll do some stamping on that one as well. So this one's dry. Look how pretty that pearl button shows through the images that I layered with this coffee dyed tissue paper and some rubber stamping. Looks so pretty. So the next thing I like to do is to take some art glitter glue in my little fine applicator and go around this edge. I kind of flip it over, go around this edge with some art glitter glue. And then I'm going to take, and before you do it, it's easier to cut it away, but I didn't this time. No big deal. Going around that button with my scissors, just making that tissue paper smaller. And then I'm going to fold those little edges over around the glue so that goes all the way around, and that way my image goes around the edge, the rolled edge of the button. Just like that. And then completely let that dry before removing this paper. I'm going to take another piece of that coffee dyed tissue paper, my little round mandala stamp. I love these little guys. I use them a lot and show them a lot in videos because they're just so darn cute. And stamp that right onto the coffee dyed tissue paper. And now I'm going to put it over this. That's that chipboard that I didn't like the image on. I covered it up using some gesso. I'm going to put some Mod Podge over the top. And I like to do these things on just a book that I've removed. I saw someone on YouTube that when they got a book to make a journal out of it, they use this as their gluing and dyeing place so you don't mess up your table or your mat, and it works so well. So I'm using that. So I can lay this down and put my thin layer of Mod Podge and use my stamped image over the top. I love stamping on this coffee dyed tissue. It's so pretty. It just makes it so pretty. This tag is going to be gorgeous with that coffee dyed streaks through it and the mandala. So pretty. Okay, and I'm going to let that dry. This one is dry, and I'm not going to go around this rolled edge. On this one, I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to take my emery board and just go around that edge, and it removes the rest of the napkin off the edge. So all that's left is your decorated top of your button. And now you can take Distress ink and go around the edges of the button. I'm going to use chipped sapphire Distress ink, which is kind of a dark blue. And I'm going to just distress the edge of that napkin all the way around. And I could leave it smooth just like this. If it's going to get glued onto something, you don't have to poke those buttonholes back through again. But I really like the buttonholes showing. because I can tie a piece of ribbon or something through and just make it even more interesting. And then you see that it's a button, so there you go. Napkin image on a button, ready to be sprayed and sealed. This one's not quite dry. And now back to this one, that's dry, so you could leave that image on the back. Since you're not going to see it, you could leave it, or you can sand it off. I think this time I might even just leave it because it's not going to be in the way. And now what I'm going to do is take some Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2 and add a little bit of color. Okay, so here are Neocolor 2s and a water brush. And I'm just going to pick up some color. I'm going to add a little bit of a yellow ochre in the background, and I'm just going to tip off the crayon, pick up some color, and then come to the button and add some color to it. So it'll have to be sprayed with a spray sealer, but look how pretty that made that image that I've stamped just pop right off the button. It's so pretty. Perfect art supply for this. You know how we love our Neocolors. Look at that. That is gorgeous. Gorgeous. And I think I'm gonna add just a little touch of color to the butterfly, so let me do that. Okay, so I'm taking a little bit of orange. This is the flame orange color. I'm going to add just a little bit to the butterfly. Not a lot. I kind of like it muted, and especially with the coffee dye papers. But that's super pretty. How about a little touch of blue? Blue complements orange, so let's add a touch of blue to this postage image. There. Look, so pretty, and the pearl shows behind it. So I'm going to spray seal that, and that's ready to go to use on it. I'm adding some little pops of color to this, and I used a Posca pen to make the little orange dots and the little white dots. And you can also use things like, these are Arteza, the brush pens. This is in orange, so you can come back in with your little brush pen and add some pops of color to that tissue paper. Just be sure that you use a spray acrylic sealer over it to seal it in. But look how pretty. That just made this mandala. So don't forget using things like your pens, your markers, your Uniposca paint pens. You can use things like gelatos to color them. You could do gelato with a water brush or Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2. You pretty much can do a little bit of everything on top of the tissue paper and then seal it in. And I might even glue, I think I'm going to glue a little fancy gem in the middle. This will be gorgeous. So be creative, because creativity is endless. And just a tip, if you can't find any white buttons to decorate or pearly buttons to decorate, and all you have are colored buttons, be sure to put a layer of gesso over the top, in a white gesso, because if you try to put an image over this, it does come out really dull. The blue color or the color of the button will show through. If you like that, you could leave that, but if you don't want it to show through and you really want just your image to show, then you'll want to put gesso over it first and let it dry up. So I put a little gem in the middle of this one. Look how pretty that looks. I used some Nuvo drops to add some sparkle Nuvo drops around this ladybug. Some Spectrum Noir glitter ink. Spectrum Noir glitter ink. I put it in the background, so the background behind this butterfly is glittered. I did the same thing with this one, add some glitter ink to the back. So this is a time where you can really jazz them up by adding some gems, some flat back pearls, some Nuvo drops, some stickles, anything you have to really just decorate them up and make them really look gorgeous. So now I'm going to take some clear embossing ink. This is Emboss It Clear by Ranger. And I'm going to just stamp this entire button front with clear ink. And you just want to be sure that you can see the ink on the button, because the point of it is to attach your clear embossing powder or your colored embossing powder. And so you want to be sure you can see the ink on there. That way this will adhere. And this is just clear embossing powder that I'm going to sprinkle over the top. I'm going to cover the top with clear, like that. And now I'm going to take my heat tool, move that aside. And now it's shiny with that clear embossing powder, and where I put the Nuvo drops, the sparkly Nuvo drops, look like beads almost. It just takes it one step further, but look how beautiful that is. That button turned out so pretty, and it makes the image that you stamped pop out even more because it makes the colors come to the top, come to the surface, and look at that. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Or how about doing that around the edges and use a different color? So let's take the embossing ink, and I'm going to just roll the edges of the button in the ink. So I'm not getting any ink on the top, I'm just getting ink all around those edges. I'm going to sprinkle on some gold embossing powder. And always use tweezers so you don't burn your fingers. And you want to make sure that it's only around the edges and not on the middle. So you can take a little fine brush, and if there's any on top, you can just push that towards the edge. So if you leave it where it's at, it's going to melt on the front of the button, and you don't want that. Okay, now I'm going to heat that up. Now I've got a beautiful gold edge, so look how that embossing powder just melted all around the edge. That embossing powder is called Egyptian Gold. It's by Stampendous. So it's got that kind of a hologram sparkle to it. But look at how it took that bird image and just a plain button and just made this such a beautiful little bit of ephemera to put on my junk journal. This butterfly one was with a napkin with a butterfly image, and then I used copper embossing powder. Same technique, rolling the edge in my embossing ink and covering it with copper embossing powder and heating it with a heat tool. So just one more idea for jazzing up buttons to make ephemera for your junk journals. You can also use matte medium. This is the multi-medium matte by Ranger, and I just used a paintbrush to cover the front of it with a nice thin coat. Now I'm going to put clear embossing powder over it and heat it with my heat tool. The end result of that, it is a bubbly finish. See how it's kind of bubbly, and it dries in not a smooth finish, but it makes a really pretty looking marble finish as opposed to using embossing ink, and this one came out with a smooth finish. So that's the difference. So it's just adding texture. If you want a textured top to it, then use matte medium. So I hope these gave you some ideas for things to put onto buttons using tissue paper and stamping, or the inside of napkins, using napkins to cover buttons. And I'll put a link to in the description box below to the video where I saw someone else doing this, just to give her a shout out. And of course, I'm just taking it a little step further to do some rubber stamping and adding some color with some Neo colors. And just making some beautiful, beautiful buttons with rubber stamps and buttons. So dig in your button boxes, flip those buttons over, use the back sides, cover them up with something really fun and neat. Use your little miniature rubber stamps, tissue paper, napkin, and have some fun. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know which was your favorite button you saw here, or let me know if you've tried this and what you've used on your buttons to create mixed media buttons for your project. Go make some art, because art soothes the heart.